Hey guys, tonight we slip beneath the star-speckled Athenian sky, where a warm wind ruffles the olive trees and the marble temples glow faintly in the moonlight. You're standing in the shadow of the Parthenon, sandals scuffed, fig juice still sticky on your fingers, when an almighty crack of thunder makes you jump out of your toga. The gods are bickering again, because of course they are. And you, yes, you, are about to get dragged into something no mortal should witness. A donkey is chewing an ancient scroll. Athena is losing her divine cool. And you, for some unfathomable reason, are going to help her teach that donkey to read. You probably won't survive this without getting trampled, zapped, or turned into a marble bust labeled Moronicus the Curious. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing how far this little bedtime caravan stretches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the marble steps of the Acropolis, your knees aching and your sandals full of gravel. Behind you, a chorus of crickets murmurs like gossiping senators. Ahead, Athena is pacing like an overcaffeinated tutor, eyes fixed on the clumsiest trespasser Athens has ever known. A donkey? Not just any donkey. He's wearing a half-eaten laurel wreath, has chalk dust on his nose, and is aggressively trying to butt heads with the base of a statue of Pallas herself. You pause, unsure whether to laugh or run. But before you can do either, a scroll sails past your ear, trailing parchment like a paper comet. That creature just chewed through a 3rd century poem, Athena shrieks, arms flailing, her usually regal demeanor unraveling like a poorly tied sandal strap. You glance down. The donkey, let's call him Cleon because you're told that's his name, looks up at you with a face that says, "Was that important?" He belches. You smell papyrus. The air ripples with divine tension. Athena's feathers, yes, her armor has feathers, don't ask, are rustling like a henhouse in a windstorm. She raises one hand, preparing a lightning bolt of discipline, except it sputters and dies. Not because she feels merciful, but because Zeus just capped her divine data usage for the week. Long story. "I'm going to teach him to read," she mutters finally, more to herself than to you. You blink. "I'm sorry, what?" Athena turns, eyes glinting. "Yes, this floppy-eared chaos sponge shall read Homer. Or I shall wear a tunic of olive leaves and let Apollo win this month's council debate." You're starting to suspect sleep deprivation is contagious. Still, you're hooked. There's something about Cleon, the way he blinks unevenly, the way he chases butterflies like forgotten thoughts, that feels oddly poetic. And as if summoned by the word Apollo, the golden god himself materializes on a cloud of harp strings and smugness. "What now?" he says, peering over his shoulder at Cleon, who is now enthusiastically licking a statue's knee. Athena squares her shoulders. "He will read. I will teach him." Apollo raises one eyebrow, then the other. Then, as if this is perfectly reasonable behavior, he nods slowly and says, "Then I suppose I shall prepare your olive leaf tunic. You've seen this before, not the divine dressmaking, no, but the sibling rivalry. This is less about donkeys and more about pride, and unfortunately for you, mortals are usually collateral damage." The wind picks up. The olive trees sway like gossiping ants. You shiver and instinctively step closer to Athena, which she notices. "You," she says suddenly, turning to you. "You're clever. You passed the Sphinx's riddle, didn't you?" "Barely," you reply, remembering that the answer wasn't eggplant, no matter how passionately you'd argued it. "Good. Then you'll help me," Athena says. "Consider yourself my scribe, assistant, and whatever a donkey tutor needs." Cleon lets out a prolonged snort and knocks over a half-built column. And just like that, you're drafted into divine nonsense. You spend the rest of the evening clearing scroll fragments from Cleon's mouth. The donkey has strong opinions about theogony, ignores Oedipus Rex, but shows mild interest in romantic inscriptions carved on abandoned pottery. Athena, meanwhile, sketches out a curriculum, which mostly involves drawing oversized letters on the temple floor and bribing Cleon with fig-stuffed barley cakes. Historians still argue whether donkeys were ever used as message carriers, she mutters, handing you a scroll labeled Beta Exercises, Do Not Eat. Cleon eats it. By the time the moon slides behind Mount Hymettus, your hands are stained with ink. Your patience is unraveling, and the donkey has learned exactly one thing, that when he stomps on the letter gamma, you squeal. He likes that. But something stirs in you, not just curiosity, but a weird, improbable hope, because Cleon pauses now when he sees a shape. He sniffs the air when Athena mutters a phrase. He's not just reacting, he's remembering. Could this actually work? Could a donkey, trained with enough figs and enough divine willpower, learn to read? Somewhere in the clouds, a muse sneezes, and from deep in the ground beneath the Acropolis, a tremor rattles an ancient, long-forgotten vase sealed in a dusty tomb. It hums faintly, its old enchantments waking for the first time in centuries. But you don't notice any of that. You're too busy wiping fig pulp off Cleon's eyebrows. Cleon, it turns out, is not just any donkey. You discover this the next morning when you wake up with your face pressed against a cracked mosaic and fig seeds stuck to your cheek. Athena has vanished, probably off summoning ancient wisdom or yelling at Apollo again, but Cleon is still here, staring solemnly at a puddle like it might reveal the secrets of the universe. You rub your eyes. Morning, Cleon. He brays softly, then nudges something toward you with his nose. It's not another scroll. It's a carved wooden tag, worn and half buried in dirt. You lift it carefully. The inscription is faded, but you make out enough to read, Cleon of Delos, property of the Temple of Artemis. Do not return. You glance at Cleon. He sneezes dramatically and then tries to chew the tag. And suddenly you realize Cleon has a past, a weird past. Why would a sacred donkey be banished from a temple? You've heard of goats that got kicked out of oracle school for head-butting omens, but this is something different. You start to ask, what did you do? But Cleon bolts. He charges headlong through a hedge of pomegranate bushes, sending birds shrieking into the air and a nearby philosopher tumbling backward off his thinking rock. You chase him through a tangled market alley, past a potter's stall, through a net of drying squid, and right into a heap of laundry. The laundress screams, curses, and pelts you with wet tunics as Cleon trots smugly ahead, ears flicking with mischief. This is your life now. Eventually, he slows down and stops at a crumbling little amphitheater at the edge of town. It's barely more than a horseshoe of stone, overgrown with vines and silence. You slump onto a bench, panting. Cleon plops down beside you and chews on a piece of ivy, and then he does something absolutely bizarre. He looks at a bit of graffiti scratched into the stone, just a messy drawing of a lyre and a stick figure, and he brays, loudly, joyfully, like he recognizes it. You lean in. You know what that is? He knocks his nose against it twice. Historians still argue whether animals have symbolic memory. Some say they can form emotional attachments to objects. Others think that's just romantic nonsense, like thinking your cat understands your breakup playlist. But this feels different. You reach into your bag and pull out the battered stylus Athena left you. Drawing carefully in the dust, you sketch the shape of the symbol again. More deliberate this time. Then a second, a third. Cleon watches. He doesn't try to eat the stick this time. He watches. You remember that Athena said he needed motivation, something that meant something to him. So you dig. That night, back at the temple, while Cleon snuffles through a bowl of lentils and absently headbutts an amphora, you whisper to a curious priestess, "Did any donkeys ever serve at the temple of Artemis?" She snorts. "More than you'd guess. One nearly became a divine mount, but he got caught drinking ceremonial oil and, well, things went downhill." You wait. The beast was obsessed with music, wouldn't stop trying to mimic the chorus girls, made a mess of rituals. Artemis ordered him removed and erased from the rolls. Cleon flicks his tail, oblivious to his former fame. So now you know. You're not teaching just any donkey. You're teaching a washed-up ex-temple performer who was too chaotic for Artemis and too weird for sacred work. Which explains a lot. The next morning, you and Athena set up the first classroom in the courtyard. It's rough. There's no chalkboard, no desks, just a sun-bleached wall and a few clumps of wild thyme growing where the floor should be. Athena draws the first letter on the stone, Alpha, with the tip of her spear. Cleon steps forward. He stares. You hold your breath. Then he snorts, turns around, and kicks the letter with both hooves. "Progress," you say optimistically, ducking the flying dust cloud. Athena is not amused. Over the next few hours, you try everything. Scratched symbols in the dirt, honey water tracing, even singing the letters in rhythm to an old temple hymn. Cleon hates your singing. He tells you this by sitting on your foot. Then comes a breakthrough. You're halfway through sketching the letter mu when Cleon snorts once, then nudges the shape. Not the dirt, not your hand, the letter. Athena narrows her eyes. Again. You draw it a second time. This time he touches it and brays. It's not perfect. He probably thinks it means snack. But it's recognition. It's the first crack in the stone. A mainstream fact you recall mid-miracle. In some remote areas of ancient Greece, herders used basic symbols to mark herd behavior, grazing routes, illness signs, food preferences. The idea of animals recognizing symbols isn't as ridiculous as it sounds. The difference here is Cleon might be reading for meaning. The sun dips low, shadows lengthen. Athena declares the day a tentative win. Cleon is rewarded with an entire fig pie, which he devours in 5 bites and then immediately regrets. He groans so loudly a nearby nymph offers to cast a digestion charm. That night, as you both rest beneath a fig tree, you scratch a new letter into the dirt beside you. Kappa. It's his first initial, and you wonder if he'll notice. He does. And this time, he doesn't try to eat it. He just stares. Then quietly, he lies down next to it, curling his hooves beneath him like an overgrown cat. Maybe he does know it's his. Maybe he remembers more than you think. The wind stirs the olive branches. Somewhere, a lyre plays faintly on the wind. And just as your eyelids drift closed, you think you hear Athena whisper something. Let's see Apollo chew on that. The next morning starts with a fight between a god and a goose. You were just trying to refill Cleon's water bucket. Simple enough, except apparently it belonged to a sacred goose who now refuses to leave the temple courtyard. Athena is already in the middle of threatening it with divine banishment when Apollo arrives in a sunbeam, harp slung casually across his back like he's not late, not smug, and not here to sabotage everything. "Oh, how's the alphabet apocalypse going?" he asks, flicking a grape off his perfectly gold shoulder. Athena rolls her eyes so hard they could power a water wheel. "I trust your leafy toga is in progress," she says, summoning a quill out of thin air with unnecessary flourish. Apollo lounges on a bench that wasn't there a moment ago. "I'm simply here to observe, and possibly witness the glorious moment when a hoofed herbivore forgets how to breathe mid-syllable." You sigh. Cleon, as usual, is oblivious. He's trying to drink ink from the calligraphy pot and has somehow gotten the stylus wedged in his ear. Athena jabs a finger in your direction. You, scribe. We're adding sentence structure today. Build a sentence for him. Short, simple. No more than 3 words. You stare at the donkey, then at the sky, then at the dirt, trying to remember what counts as a subject and what counts as a potential snack. Eventually, you scratch out, Cleon sees figs. Athena claps, delighted. Apollo yawns. Cleon steps forward. He stares at the sentence. You hold your breath. He sniffs the word figs and brays, loudly. Then he licks it. Close enough? Progress, Athena declares. Apollo scoffs. One could argue he just has a Pavlovian response to food vocabulary. Athena smirks. One could argue that if one enjoyed losing bets. The tension crackles like static on goat wool. It's only broken when Cleon steps squarely into the sentence and poops on the subject. Your stylus snaps in 2. Apollo casually tosses an olive into his mouth and adds, "Perhaps you should try interpretive dance next." Might reach him on a more visceral level. Athena ignores him. We double the sessions, morning and night. And you, she points to you, need to create distractions he can resist, scrolls he can't eat, symbols he'll want to memorize. Incentivize with fig tokens if necessary. You nod obediently, trying not to think about how much fig you've already traded, just to keep Cleon's attention for 5 minutes. That night, you're crouched in a storeroom lit by flickering oil lamps, cutting scroll fragments into simple pictogram flashcards. You've drawn a fig, a flute, a fish, and, because Cleon seems intrigued by drama, a very dramatic-looking thundercloud. By dawn, you've built a full deck. And Cleon? He surprises you again. He actually chooses cards. Repeatedly. Every time you shuffle the deck and ask him to find fig, he noses it out. Historians still argue whether ancient animals could distinguish between artistic representations, Athena says as she watches through a lattice window. But this might settle a few scroll room debates. By week's end, you're running short of parchment, short of figs, and dangerously low on patience. But Cleon's progress is undeniable. He can identify 5 nouns, 3 verbs, and the word stop, which he ignores, obviously. One morning, while preparing the next batch of lesson symbols, a thought strikes you. What if he's not just learning symbols? What if he's forming meaning? You scribble down a new challenge. Cleon is smart. Athena raises an eyebrow. That's bold. You place the scroll in front of him. Cleon sniffs it, taps the word Cleon, brays, then looks directly at you. Your heart does a weird little hop. Do it again, Athena says, this time with a whisper of disbelief in her voice. You do. And again he finds his name. Then smart. Apollo shows up just in time to see this. Impressive, he says through gritted teeth, though his smile doesn't reach his eyes. Although, he stands, stretches, and makes a show of adjusting his tunic. I wonder how he'd do under pressure. Athena crosses her arms. What kind of pressure? A test, Apollo says, eyes gleaming. Let's call it an exam. You and Athena exchange a glance. What kind of exam? You ask, already regretting it. Oh, nothing strenuous, just a friendly competition. Semi-literate creatures, donkeys, goats, perhaps a bored sphinx with spelling issues. You know, peers. Athena looks like she's chewing nails. Fine. Apollo grins. 2 weeks. The reading games. Let's see if your donkey knows his diphthongs or if he's just memorizing snack shapes. Cleon immediately eats the word games. As Apollo vanishes in a burst of harp music and smugness, Athena lets out a long, low sigh. You reach for the stylus. So, what's our curriculum look like now? Everything, she mutters. We teach him everything. And so you do. Over the next days, you build a routine. Breakfast scrolls, midday fig-bribed grammar drills, evening symbol puzzles. Cleon starts responding to whole phrases, simple commands, funny rhymes. He even develops a particular hatred for the word wait, which is probably fair. One afternoon, you catch him staring at a scroll on his own, not licking it, not chewing it, reading it, or at least trying. You sit beside him, whispering, "You're not just a donkey, are you?" He snorts softly, and you swear there's a glimmer in his eye, like he remembers who he was or who he wants to be. And maybe, just maybe, this absurd quest to make him literate isn't so absurd after all. Next morning, Athena arrives with a scroll so long it has to be carried by 2 harpies. It unfurls across the temple courtyard like a laundry line for giants. Cleon immediately tries to nap on it. This, Athena announces, sweeping a dramatic arm across the parchment, is the official reading games curriculum. You squint. Are those chapters? 17, she replies grimly, including dramatic reading, basic comprehension, and she pauses for maximum irritation, interpretive hoof-stomping. Cleon farts loudly and rolls over. You suppress a sigh. Do we have, a plan for making that palatable to a donkey? Athena frowns. He likes figs and rhythm. We use that. So begins what you can only describe as literacy boot camp, but with snacks. Your first assignment, rhyme recognition. Athena writes on a board made of polished slate. Cleon naps. Cleon claps. Cleon maps, you suggest. No, Athena says. We don't want to confuse him with geography yet. Cleon, in a rare burst of enthusiasm, kicks the board. You take that as a vote for chaos. Next, you try vowel practice using fruit. A like apple, which he eats. E like eggplant? You wrinkle your nose. Too vague? Athena raises an eyebrow. He's a donkey, not a diplomat. Still, Cleon surprises you both by sniffing the letters, then braying only at the correct ones, especially the one shaped like a fig slice. One mainstream fact you dig up while leafing through old scrolls. Ancient Greek schools used wax tablets and styluses for early literacy. Kids practiced by copying letters repeatedly, usually starting with their names, which makes your current situation sort of traditional, except with hooves and less discipline. But here's the real twist of the day. During a mid-afternoon break, Cleon finds a chunk of discarded scroll near the temple's incense table. Instead of eating it, he picks it up in his teeth and drops it at your feet. It says, "Sing, muse, of the wrath of Achilles." It's from the Iliad. Athena goes very still. Where did he get that? You point dumbly to the direction he came from. Over there, I think. It was just lying. She cuts you off. He recognized Homer. Homer. You stare at Cleon. You read that? He flutters his lips and bumps the scroll again. Historians still argue whether oral tradition influenced animal behavior, Athena mutters. But if he responds to epic poetry, we've just entered a new genre of absurdity. So you test it. You dig up another line, one of the famous ones. And so they fought like wolves in the night. You read it aloud. Cleon perks up. Read it again, slower, drawing out the rhythm. He rocks in place, like he's moving to the meter. He stomps once, then twice. Athena claps a hand to her mouth. He's sinking to dactylic hexameter. You don't know what that is, but it sounds impressive. That night, you sit under the stars, scrolls piled beside you, watching Cleon trace hoof marks in the dust that vaguely resemble letters. Whether by accident or miracle, he's starting to leave patterns, intentional ones. He carves half a chai, a crooked delta, once, bizarrely, a nearly perfect theta. And not just from muscle memory, from thought. You tell him stories to go with each symbol. Chi becomes a crossroads, Delta, a river bend. Theta, a wheel rolling through dreams. He listens, not always patiently, but enough. Athena joins you by the third story, holding a cup of something that smells like pomegranate and stubbornness. He's doing more than reading, she says softly. He's connecting. You nod. But will it be enough? She doesn't answer, just looks toward the distant hills where Apollo is likely preparing something flashy and smug. The next morning, it rains. Of course it does. A week before the games, and your scrolls are now limp noodles of ink and disappointment. Cleon is thrilled. He splashes through puddles like a toddler and tries to drink from a fountain shaped like Zeus's face. Your lesson plan is drenched, literally. But Athena improvises. She teaches using pebbles. Symbol retention, she explains, laying out small stones in letter shapes. Let's see if he can still identify them out of context. Cleon examines them like a jeweler inspecting sapphires. Then, gently, he noses the ones that spell his name. One fringe detail you vaguely remember from a dusty old scroll. In early Thracian rituals, animals were sometimes taught to read patterns as omens, symbol clusters interpreted by priests. Scholars still debate if those animals truly recognized patterns or simply mimicked responses. Athena seems to think Cleon's doing the former. Later, while trying to dry your scrolls near the forge, which is now full of curious satyrs, you have a realization. Can he write? You whisper. Athena raises an eyebrow. With what? You grab a stick, set it in Cleon's mouth, clear a patch of dirt. Try to draw a circle, you coax. He chews the stick for 5 minutes, then finally, he jabs it into the ground and wiggles it like a compass. The result is not a circle, not even close, but it is deliberate, an attempt, the first mark a donkey ever made on purpose. You want to cry. Instead, you whisper, "Let's try again tomorrow." Athena sighs. At this rate, we might have to enter him in the poetry round. You both laugh. Cleon sneezes, stomps his hoof, and accidentally traces the Greek letter rho in the mud. Maybe poetry wouldn't be so bad. The reading games are 6 days away, and the temple smells like burnt scrolls, wet fur, and panic. You wake up to the sound of Cleon braying aggressively at a statue of Hermes, who probably deserves it since he once stole 50 cows and tried to pretend it was a prank. Athena greets you with a single word, drills. Today is all about memory. She's devised a test called Scroll Relay. Basically, you hide small strips of parchment in different parts of the temple, each with a word Cleon has learned. He must retrieve them in the correct order to form a sentence. If he fails, well, Athena doesn't say what happens if he fails, but the way she grinds her teeth suggests it involves goat sacrifices and interpretive rage. You hide the scrolls. First one says Cleon. Second, nose. Third, words. You whisper the phrase to him once, tap your stylus against your palm like a conductor, and step back. To your utter disbelief, Cleon finds all three. Not instantly. There are detours involving a squirrel, a fig basket, and a goat he seems to think is his mother. But eventually, triumphantly, he assembles the sentence in the dust. Cleon knows words. Athena claps once. He's ready for nouns and adjectives, and maybe the metaphysical concept of identity. You rub your temples. Can we start with blue figs first? That afternoon, a curious visitor arrives. Nike, the winged goddess of victory, literally floating 2 inches off the ground. She peers at Cleon like she's trying to decide whether to endorse him or smite him with a golden sandal. "You're sponsoring this?" she asks Athena. Athena crosses her arms. "He's unorthodox." Nike blinks. "He's a donkey." "Exactly." Nike shrugs. "Well, history loves an underdog." Or an underdonkey, apparently. As Nike disappears into a burst of wind and laurel confetti, Cleon tries to eat the victory sash she left behind. Progress is not linear. The next day, you begin comparative reading. Athena brings in a goat named Eudora, Apollo's entry. She's got a smug face and oddly stylish hoof polish. Eudora, unlike Cleon, reads flawlessly. She taps each letter with uncanny precision and emits a bleat that sounds suspiciously like syntax. Cleon watches her like a gladiator sizing up a lion. You whisper, "You can take her. You just have to stop eating the lesson plans." The lesson today is visual sequencing. You lay out 3 pictograms, a fig, a donkey, a harp. You ask, which one comes first in the sentence? The donkey eats the fig while ignoring the harp. Cleon, in an unexpected moment of clarity, nudges the fig first, then himself, then knocks the harp off the table. You gasp. Athena beams. Eudora bleats in protest. You win that round. That night, while oil lamps cast long shadows on the colonnades, you try poetry. Athena reads, "The moon weeps figs into silent mouths." Cleon does not understand a word, but then when you read it again, slower, and set a rhythm, pat, pat, pause, he begins to sway. You tap your stylus to match the cadence, and suddenly Cleon is stepping in time. You swap out moon for Cleon. He snorts. You try mouths for hooves. He stomps twice. Historians still argue whether meter aids memory or mystifies it, Athena murmurs, eyes bright. Either way, you've accidentally invented donkey slam poetry. By now, Cleon can recognize about 30 words, 10 basic sentences, 3 rhyming phrases, and the subtle art of ignoring Apollo when he heckles from the treetops. Your proudest moment comes during a comprehension drill. You write, "Cleon sees harp." Harp is loud. Cleon runs. He reads each line. Then, without prompting, he brays loudly and bolts across the courtyard. Athena nearly drops her goblet. He understood cause and effect. You're too busy chasing him to reply, but inside your heart is doing cartwheels. Apollo visits again the next morning, flanked by nymphs and a satyr DJ with a lyre made of bronze and petty intentions. "I hear you're teaching your donkey verbs." He grins. "Should I be worried?" Athena leans against a column, confident as a cat on a throne. "Only if your goat starts asking for synonyms." Apollo narrows his eyes. "Then let's make it interesting. If Cleon wins, I'll compose an ode in his honor." Athena snorts. "And if he loses?" Apollo smiles sweetly. He becomes a temple mascot, wearing a sign that says, "I flunked literacy." You look at Cleon. He's wearing half a scroll as a hat and chasing his own tail. "Sure," you say weakly. "Let's do that." The final prep day arrives and the temple is buzzing with tension. You've laminated everything in fig wax to prevent accidental eating. Cleon wears a garland of olive leaves and a mildly confused expression. Before bed, you whisper to him, "You know what's coming, right?" He nudges your hand. You take that as a yes. Then he flops over onto your notes. Yeah, he's ready, sort of. The sun rises like a golden drum roll over Mount Parnassus. The reading games have officially begun. You stand at the edge of a marble amphitheater that looks like someone took a regular stadium and gave it a bookish inferiority complex. Columns everywhere, scrolls painted on the walls, statues of muses watching silently, as if silently judging your donkey's chances. Athena appears at your side, radiant and calm. "Remember," she says, "this is about breaking expectations." "Right," you mutter. "Just expectations about what a donkey can do, or expectations that he won't spontaneously kick the oracle?" Cleon is trotting in a circle nearby, wearing a sash that says "Literacy Now" and a decorative olive crown that he's trying to chew. The first event, symbol identification. Each animal contestant is presented with a line of letters. One is different, written backward, upside down, or with a slight error. They must point it out. Eudora the goat struts up first. She finishes in record time with a subtle flick of her tail at the odd lambda. Then comes a fox, a crow, and, surprise entry, a very literate tortoise from Delos. They all perform admirably. Now it's Cleon's turn. He trots up to the letters. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, zeta, eta, theta, theta, iota, 2 thetas. One is upside down. You hold your breath. He squints, blinks once, and proceeds to sneeze all over the board. The crowd murmurs. You cringe. But then, slowly, majestically, he lifts his left hoof and stomps once on the upside-down theta. You nearly faint. Athena, deadpan. Subtlety is not his strength. Accuracy might be. 1 point. You're on the board. The next event, vocabulary match. Contestants must connect images to written words. Each word is phonetically written in large, clear letters. Nothing too abstract. Figure harp fire. Donkey. Cleon's word, harp. The image panel, a fig, a harp, a torch, a grape cluster. He eyes them all, snorts, then, with supreme disdain, walks right up and kicks the harp clean off its pedestal. You would call that vandalism, if it weren't also correct. The judges exchange looks. A muse whispers something to the oracle. A score is announced. Cleon's in second place. Now the pressure's real. During the break, you sit beside Cleon in the shade of a laurel tree. You hand him a scroll, one of the earliest ones he learned from. He doesn't chew it. Instead, he noses it gently, then lays his head in your lap. You whisper, "You're doing amazing." He sighs, possibly in contentment, or possibly because you're sitting on his snack bag. Then comes reading aloud. Yes, aloud. Eudora goes first, of course. She bleats her way through a line from Hesiod, her inflection eerily spot on. A satyr contestant delivers a surprisingly moving excerpt from a love poem. Then, Cleon. A judge unrolls the parchment and reads the sentence silently to him first. You recognize it from one of your drills. Cleon finds the fig near the stream. He stares at it. You hold your breath. Then, gravelly, uneven, and sounding a bit like someone gargling pebbles, he utters something that rhymes with "Geclair fig strem." The amphitheater falls into stunned silence. Athena whispers, "Did he just speak?" "Sort of." The oracle, who hasn't blinked in 10 years, blinks, then holds up a gold token. Cleon scores full marks for effort, possibly also for originality. The final event of the day is unexpected. Creative comprehension. Contestants are given a short sentence, then must act it out using props. Cleon's sentence, "Donkey reads and rests." He listens, sniffs the sentence, then proceeds to pick up a scroll in his mouth, walk in a small circle, and dramatically collapse onto a bed of cushions. There's a long pause. Then thunderous applause. Apollo looks like he just swallowed a lemon dipped in shame. That night, back at your borrowed temple quarters, you and Athena debrief over honey cakes. "He's in the lead," she says. You nod slowly. "So, now what?" Athena glances out the window. "Tomorrow is the team round." You blink. "Team?" "Yes, you'll be his partner." Wait, me? In the competition?" She sips her wine like someone who's been waiting for this moment all week. "You've taught him. Now you'll translate him." You look over at Cleon, who's trying to wear his scroll like a toga. "Oh no," you whisper. "We're doomed." She grins. "Just remember the fig rhythm. And don't trip on his tail." One fun detail from an old inscription you once read in Athens. In ancient mock trials, animals were occasionally tried for crimes like crop damage. They were represented by humans, complete with arguments and defense. You're starting to feel like one of those handlers, except historians still argue whether divine animals are immortal in intellectual contests, or if those stories were metaphors for natural forces. Either way, you're now living the metaphor, and it smells like donkey sweat and victory. Before bed, Athena gifts you a charm, a tiny scroll made of silver, engraved with Cleon's first scribbled letter. For good luck, she says. You tie it around your wrist. Tomorrow, you read together. Morning comes with a trumpet made of conch shell and someone yelling, "Scroll up!" in the courtyard. You're bleary-eyed, holding half a sesame cake and all of your anxiety, and your donkey is meditating. Okay, not really meditating. He's just fallen asleep with his head resting on a scroll labeled Odes to Olive Oil, Volume 2. But hey, it's the intention that counts. Today's the team round, and the amphitheater is packed. Spectators wave olive branches like foam fingers. Apollo's squad arrives with matching capes that say Syntax Squad. Athena merely raises one eyebrow. Classic silent roast. The first event, joint translation. Each team receives an ancient line of poetry, written in Old Attic Greek. One member reads it aloud. The other translates it into action or simplified phrasing. You and Cleon step up. Your phrase, "When wisdom walks barefoot, the stars learn to whisper." Right. You speak it aloud in your best philosopher voice, slow, dreamy, dramatic. Then nudge Cleon gently. To your amazement, he walks slowly across the stage, bare hooves tapping softly, then looks up at the stars painted on the dome and lets out a quiet, thoughtful bray. It's poetic. One judge actually wipes away a tear. Do donkeys feel metaphors? Someone whispers. Historians still argue whether non-humans in myth could interpret abstract thought or were just very well trained. Either way, the scoreboard gives you full points. You whisper to Cleon, "If we win this, I'm getting you your own library." He snorts. You assume it's excitement and not a sneeze of indifference. Next up, sentence puzzle duel. Two teams face off. Each team is given a scrambled line of philosophy, and their task is to rearrange it on giant placards into the correct order. Your line is from Socrates. To know is to know that you know nothing. But the placards say, "You know nothing that no to is to the goat team," gets a different quote and finishes quickly. You stare at Cleon. He looks at the placards, then, hoof by hoof, nudges them into place. Not perfectly, but close. To know that you know nothing is to know. You exchange glances with Athena. It's a remix, you murmur. Post-Socratic interpretation, she shrugs. Somewhere in the crowd, a bearded philosopher with ink-stained robes gasps in either horror or awe. The judges give partial credit and a bonus for creativity. By now, the crowd is firmly divided between Team Cleon and Team Reality. You can hear murmurs. "He's just a donkey. He's channeling divine insight. I think he winked at me." The third event is the hardest, rhetorical response. A muse poses a simple moral dilemma. The human team member must answer aloud, but the animal must visually agree or disagree. Your dilemma: is it just to break a rule in order to help another? You take a breath. I believe it is, when the rule itself causes harm. Compassion must outrank protocol. Cleon's task is to either nod, agreement, or walk away, disagreement. He pauses, scratches behind his ear with a back hoof, then leans forward, places one hoof gently on your foot, and rests his chin on your shoulder. The entire amphitheater lets out a collective awe. Even the oracle smiles, her first known expression change since the Peloponnesian War. The judges erupt in applause. One raises a sign that says, "Profoundly yes." During lunch break, you and Cleon sit behind the amphitheater, sharing dried figs. "Hey," you say, looking into his large, oddly expressive eyes. "Do you get this? I mean, really get it? Or are you just mimicking patterns?" He blinks once. then pulls your notebook closer with his teeth and noses a page open to a poem you wrote in the margins. "Okay," you whisper. "Maybe you do get it." Athena appears, casually chewing pomegranate seeds. "You're one event away," she says. "Apollo's team is nervous. The fox had a breakdown trying to conjugate the word to nibble. The final team challenge, story build relay. One team member says a sentence. The other must add to it. You alternate until the story ends. The catch? All sentences must be grammatically correct and follow one narrative line. You begin. Once upon a time, a fig grew on a mountain. Cleon responds by tapping a pictograph of a donkey climbing. You add, the donkey sought the fig to cure his sadness. He knocks over a scroll labeled hope and noses it toward you. You reply, but when he found the fig, he gave it to a friend who needed it more. He curls his tail gently around your ankle. You say nothing for a moment. Then, and the mountain whispered, kindness is knowledge. The amphitheater is silent. Then, thunderous applause. Apollo, nowhere in sight. The judges gather. The oracle stands. A gold laurel is placed atop Cleon's head, mostly sideways, since his ears are in the way. The crowd chants his name. Sort of. It sounds more like Cleo, with a lot of fig bits in their mouths. He's won. You've won. The sky turns amber as the sun begins its descent, casting the amphitheater in a warm glow that makes everything feel just a little more mythic. Even the dust kicked up by celebratory feet seems to swirl with purpose. You and Cleon are swarmed, not just by fans or curious onlookers, but by scholars, scribes, and one deeply enthusiastic poet who immediately starts composing an ode titled The Hoof That Understood Homer. You're exhausted, ecstatic, and also a little terrified, because now, apparently, you've changed the narrative of cognitive species hierarchy in mythic pedagogy. That's how the oracle phrased it before someone handed you a wreath made of actual scroll ribbons. Cleon. He's chewing on a laurel leaf and basking in the attention like he was born for this. You never thought you'd be envious of a donkey's media training. Athena leans over and whispers, "Now comes the hard part." You blink. "Harder than teaching a donkey to read?" She smiles wryly, maintaining the illusion that it was ever impossible. And she's not wrong. Suddenly, everyone wants to believe that Cleon is proof of divine literacy, that the gods have always been holding out on letting animals into the conversation. That wisdom isn't just reserved for the bipedal or bearded. Historians still argue whether myths like this reflect literal belief or were coded satire for elite circles. One Athenian comedy, now lost except for a clay tablet with partial dialogue, allegedly featured a pig delivering a soliloquy on ethics. Was it a metaphor or a precursor to your current reality? No one knows, but the crowd sure doesn't care. You're dragged into a post-games symposium hosted by a bunch of overly philosophical birds. Yes, literal birds who have studied under Hermes in the art of messenger rhetoric. They clack excitedly, chirping about potential future debates between Cleon and a raven scholar named Dromio. You gently decline, mostly because Cleon has already curled up on a cushion and is gently snoring. Eventually, you sneak away to your quarters. The temple feels quieter now, as if exhaling after days of structured chaos. You wash off the fig juice and amphitheater dust, sit beside your donkey, and finally ask the question that's been tapping at your mind since this whole saga began. Why did you stay? Cleon opens one sleepy eye. You could have run off, eaten scrolls, knocked over the oracle, but you didn't. You let me teach you. He blinks again, then noses your shoulder and lets out a huff of breath that smells faintly of ink and olives. You smile. Yeah, okay, Fair answer. The next morning, everything shifts. The games are over, but the conversation has just begun. Scribes start copying fragments of Cleon's readings onto papyrus. One merchant is already selling official Cleon quills, which are just badly trimmed feathers dipped in donkey hair. But whatever. Athena calls a private meeting with you. She leads you through a hidden path in the olive grove, past a fountain shaped like a hippocampus reading a book, until you reach a stone bench shaped like an open scroll. She sits. You sit. Cleon stands nearby, staring at a bee. There's been talk, she begins. Uh-oh, you say automatically. She ignores that. Some of the other gods think you've tampered with the balance. That knowledge was never meant to be shared so freely, especially not across species. You frown. But isn't wisdom a gift? Aren't you literally the goddess of... She raises a hand. Yes, but gift-giving and uncontrolled wildfire are two different things. That's when she pulls out an invitation, an embossed tablet bearing the seal of the Divine Symposium of Theocentric Boundaries. 3 nights from now, you'll speak. So will Apollo. There'll be a vote. Vote on what? Whether this donkey literacy thing should be embraced or suppressed. You glance at Cleon, who's now sticking his tongue out at a hummingbird. So, I have to convince a room full of immortals and philosophical nightmares that teaching one donkey to read isn't the beginning of the apocalypse. She smiles. Exactly. You sigh. Can I bring snacks? No. You sigh louder. The next 3 days are a flurry of prep. You craft speeches, rehearse arguments, and coach Cleon on looking appropriately pensive. You learn one historical tidbit that fascinates you. In ancient Delphi, some priests reportedly interpreted animal behavior as divine speech. Not just omens, but actual sentences, as if meaning could filter through posture and pattern. Scholars call it mythic anthroposemiotics, or as you've now dubbed it, Cleon logic. You also discover a fringe group of philosophers who believe Cleon is a reincarnated bard who got cursed mid-epic and must now redeem himself through literacy. They wear donkey ear headbands in solidarity. Cleon enjoys their figs. One night you find him scribbling in the dirt with a stick. It's not letters, not exactly, but it's close. You feel something twist warmly in your chest. When the day of the symposium arrives, the sky is a dramatic swirl of silver clouds and golden light, as if Olympus itself couldn't decide between subtlety and full theatricality. You arrive with Cleon at your side. Athena walks behind you like a quiet storm. Every immortal you can name, and a few you can't, are already seated in the chamber, which resembles an enormous library stitched together with marble, ivy, and suspiciously floating chairs. Apollo stands across the room, arms crossed, frowns surgically applied. The oracle presides. "Let us discuss," she intones, "the literacy of beasts." The words hang in the air like incense. You step forward. Cleon follows, silent. Then you speak. "Hey guys," you begin, because sometimes the informal opener shakes the heavens. "Hey guys," you say again, letting your voice settle into the ancient marble like tea seeping into parchment. Tonight we unpack a strange little thing. What happens when knowledge shows up in the wrong hooves? Some gods exchange glances. One satyr chuckles into a scroll. You continue. "It started as a joke, a dare, an experiment. I wanted to see if a donkey could learn to read, but then Cleon..." You gesture beside you, where Cleon now adjusts his posture with the dignity of a minor noble. "Well, he didn't just learn. He listened. He responded. He thought. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized I wasn't just teaching him something. I was learning how much I assumed he couldn't." There's a low hum across the chamber, somewhere between skeptical throat clearing and the rustle of old parchment. You spot Hestia warming her hands over a candle that's never gone out. She's nodding gently. Poseidon, meanwhile, is whispering to a sea urchin in a bowl. Probably irrelevant, but you're too nervous to filter for sanity right now. You pivot. So, the question isn't whether Cleons like us. The question is, are we willing to accept that us might be bigger than we thought? Apollo rises. Cue the dramatic lighting shift. He's not even trying to hide it. Knowledge, he says smoothly, isn't a toy to be passed around like a lyre at a symposium. It is structured. It is divine order. This creature mimics patterns. But does he understand? Cleon brays softly. Apollo sneers. Exactly. He makes noise. You step forward. So do a lot of your poets, Apollo. A few gods cough in suppressed laughter. Artemis outright grins. Apollo's eyes narrow. Fine. Show us. Give him something impossible. The oracle inclines her head. Agreed. A final test. From behind her throne, a scroll is brought forth. Heavy. Ancient. Its seal bears the symbol of mnemosyne, the titaness of memory. You're handed the scroll. You read aloud. Translate the paradox of the stone. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy that they themselves cannot lift it? You freeze. You're not even sure you understand that one. You look to Cleon. He blinks, stares at the floor, scratches behind one ear. Then, slowly, walks to the center of the room. He picks up a pebble, sets it in front of the oracle, then looks at Apollo and sits down. The chamber goes silent. It's not an answer in words. It's a statement. A being creates what it cannot lift, not through power but through meaning. The pebble is tiny, insignificant. Yet its weight right now is immense because it speaks. Historians still argue whether donkeys in myth could engage in symbolic logic or if the tales were simply metaphorical. But at this moment, nobody in the room seems to be questioning it. Even Apollo hesitates. Then slowly, ever so slightly, he nods. The oracle rises. The vote will proceed. The gods raise tokens, silver for yes, obsidian for no. It's close, too close. Then Hades, who hadn't bothered to show up until now, appears in the back of the room, holding a token shaped like a fig. He raises it. Yes. Majority wins. You exhale so hard your knees go weak. Cleon blinks, then lies down and immediately begins snoring. In the next few days, things move fast. You're offered a position as the new head of the Cross-Species Literacy Initiative. The title comes with a plaque, a small vineyard, and a very complicated robe. Athena tells you that the myth of Cleon will now be preserved in the Book of Peculiar Wisdom, a rarely discussed volume in Olympus, shelved somewhere between Chronicles of Talking Furniture and The Chicken That Solved a Murder. Some people still resist, of course. A centaur philosopher hosts a full debate series titled The Illusion of Donkey Insight, Hoofbeats in the Echo Chamber. It becomes wildly popular, then quietly ridiculous. Meanwhile, Cleon becomes a bit of a celebrity. Children sketch him in chalk on temple steps. Merchants sell hoof notes, tiny scrolls allegedly dictated by him. He's gifted a small library cart with wheels, which he insists on dragging himself. One day, a young girl brings him a scroll and asks him to teach her how to read. He rests his head gently on her shoulder. She giggles, and then you see him nudge the first letter with his hoof. You're not crying. You're just emotionally sweating. That night, you sit beneath the same olive tree where all this began. The wind is soft. The stars are performing their usual slow twirl. You remember your first days here, fumbling with translations, trying to impress a goddess and not get kicked by a hoofed roommate. Now you've co-written a chapter in divine history with a donkey. You lean over to Cleon, curled beside you. Think they'll still tell our story in 100 years? He doesn't answer, but he does snore softly in perfect iambic pentameter. And honestly, that's enough. The days after the vote move like warm honey through the temple corridors. Everyone seems to walk a little slower, speak a little softer, as if some kind of sacred equilibrium has been restored. You can't tell if it's reverence or just collective exhaustion, but either way, it's peaceful. You wake late. Cleon, already up, stands by the window. He's wearing a garland of dried sage someone must have left for him. He sniffs it once, unimpressed, and turns back to his private stash of apricots. There's a new scroll on your door, embossed, smells faintly of cedar wood and old arguments. You open it. It's an invitation to the annual assembly of mythic revisions, a low-key bureaucratic summit where Pantheon members and their mortal interns gather to, and this is the official language: debate, define, and delicately distort the canonical record. You groan. I just wanted to teach a donkey the alphabet, you mutter, chewing on a pomegranate seed. But of course, now your little literacy experiment is part of history, and history is never satisfied with just happening. It wants commentary, footnotes, interpretive dances. So you go. The summit is held in a mirrored hall that stretches in every direction, giving the illusion that your every awkward movement is being endlessly duplicated by a crowd of underwhelmed clones. Each god has their own delegation. Hermes shows up with a slide deck and a flock of over-caffeinated storks. Aphrodite wears a dress made entirely of metaphor. Even Dionysus appears, uninvited, half-sober, sipping what might be elderberry wine out of a turtle shell. The moderator is a satyr with a monocle and a scroll labeled Proceedings. His name is Glurnus. You can't decide if that's a nickname or a sneeze. First item on the docket: the legitimacy of interspecies intellectual exchange as portrayed in mythos. You feel a headache forming. Still, you're here. Cleon is here. And apparently so is a chorus of nymphs who've composed an a cappella lament called The Tragedy of the Ignored Hoof. Cleon seems touched. Or maybe it's the hay. When it's your turn to speak, you opt for honesty. I didn't set out to prove anything, you begin, hands awkwardly behind your back. I just had time, a donkey, and too many scrolls. I wanted to see if we'd meet in the middle. Turns out we did. A murmur passes through the mirrored chamber. You continue. There's a belief that wisdom is scarce, that the divine hoards it, that animals can't touch it, and that mortals like me just borrow it for a bit. But maybe wisdom is more like sunlight. It doesn't ask your shape. It just shines. Aphrodite nods, wiping a single delicate tear. A Minotaur lawyer begins slow clapping. Glurnus jots something down with what appears to be a squid quill pen. Historians still argue, you say, warming now, whether these tales, donkeys reading, chickens dancing, frogs leading armies, are metaphors or memories. Maybe they're both. Maybe truth isn't a straight line, but a spiral. There's silence. Then, from somewhere in the back, a low, pleased bray. Cleon. Mic dropped. You're approached afterward by a delegation from the Mythic Lexicon Guild. They want to add a new entry. Cleonism, defined as the belief that intellect is measured not by species, but by curiosity. You raise an eyebrow. Bit lofty, don't you think? They grin. That's how myths work. You leave the summit with a small satchel of scrolls, a voucher for free mead, and a signed agreement that Cleon will not be summoned for more than 3 academic panels per lunar cycle. Back at the temple, you find a note from Athena. It reads, "You're due for a promotion. Also, Cleon just ate my footnotes. Please retrieve him." You find him lounging on the roof, gazing at the stars like he's composing a celestial novel. A fringe scholar once theorized that donkeys had a natural connection to lunar cycles. They were dismissed, of course, but now maybe they'll get tenure. Cleon snorts softly as you sit beside him. You lie back, arms behind your head, watching the night sky unfurl like an ancient, glowing scroll. You point. That one's Pegasus. That one's Orion. That one's, I don't know, maybe you. Cleon seems satisfied with that. Over the following weeks, life settles into a new kind of rhythm. You teach more students, some human, some not. A Sphinx joins your evening seminar on paradoxes. She grades aggressively. Your classroom expands. One lesson takes place entirely in a tree canopy with a group of owls. Another is held underwater via enchanted bubble with a talkative octopus. But Cleon remains the heart of it. He rarely speaks, but he doesn't need to. His presence alone opens doors that were previously sealed with skepticism. You learn a fun, obscure tidbit during one of your sessions. In ancient Egyptian lore, there's mention of a donkey-headed deity who whispered secrets into the ears of scribes. No one ever took it seriously. But now, maybe someone should reopen that papyrus. Late one evening, as the temple glows with torchlight and the quiet hum of contented silence, you find yourself at your writing desk. You pen the title of your next scroll, How to Teach a Donkey to Read, and Why You Should. You pause, then add a subtitle, A Practical Guide to Impossible Things. Cleon noses your shoulder. You look down. He's holding a stick. He drops it on your desk. You recognize the shape he's carved into it, an attempt at the letter alpha. Crude, wobbly, but unmistakable. You smile. All right, buddy, lesson's not over yet. And together you dive back into the alphabet, one hoofprint at a time. You're starting to get used to the weird rhythm of it all. Your new semi-official role as Chief Cross-Species Literacy Liaison. Your increasingly experimental lesson plans, and the daily mystery of where, exactly, Cleon will nap today. Yesterday it was in the amphora storage. Today, he's curled up under a fresco of Athena defeating Ares, a single daisy inexplicably tucked behind his ear. You don't ask. You've learned not to. Word of your donkey-led literacy program spreads like olive oil on polished marble. Delegations start arriving. A raven from the Norse realms drops off a terse note. Our goats are interested. A Persian wind djinn floats in, requesting materials for sand foxes. And a strange, mossy creature from deep within the Celtic forest just stands there humming until you hand it a syllabary chart. It's overwhelming, but delightful. The temple's courtyard has transformed into a multilingual sanctuary of chirping, braying, snorting, and occasional fire-breathing debate. And then comes the turtle. Not just a turtle, the turtle. His name is Sarpedon. He is old, like pre-myth old, shell etched with symbols that even Athena squints at. He moves once every hour, speaks once every week. He arrives by pond, unannounced, bearing a single piece of papyrus. You unfurl it. It reads, What is the weight of a letter in silence? You blink. Okay, that's either really deep or he sat on a shopping list. Historians still argue whether Sarpedon is a true divine messenger or just a highly literate reptile with timing. Either way, his presence elevates the vibe. Even Cleon straightens up when he's near. You invite him to join one of the evening reading sessions. He doesn't reply, but he stays. That's answer enough. One afternoon, you gather a few of the most advanced non-human students, Cleon, a wolf named Lyssa, two argumentative frogs, and Sarpedon, and propose a challenge, a collaborative poem. They stare. Come on, you say. Verse isn't that scary. Worst case, it rhymes with curse, and we all regret it. Cleon thumps his hoof. Lyssa growls rhythmically. One of the frogs coughs in haiku. By sunset, you have a scroll containing this masterpiece. The sun forgets us until we speak in hoof marks. Stones remember all. It's raw. It's weird. It's beautiful. You read it aloud at the next symposium. The room goes still. One elder philosopher whispers, "I think I need to reevaluate my entire theory of cognition." You nod. Start with the frogs. Aphrodite commissions a mosaic of Cleon holding a scroll. It's terribly inaccurate. He's depicted reclining like a toga model, but you don't correct it. Some myths get glitter whether they want it or not. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. You receive an ominous scroll sealed in tar. Inside, a single sentence. Language is sacred, not for hooves. No signature. Cleon eats it. You high-five him. Later that week, Hermes visits again, this time more subdued. He's been watching from afar, he admits. He's not here to mock. "I think," he says, "you've opened something dangerous and wonderful." You glance at Cleon, who's licking ink off his snout. That tends to be his specialty. Hermes grins. "I'm placing a wager. A century from now, when myths are recycled and mortals stop believing, this tale will still linger. Because it's not about gods, it's about learning. And a donkey. He leaves you with a fresh batch of enchanted chalk, glows in the dark, sings in ancient Greek when broken. You'll probably regret that last feature. Teaching becomes strange, delightful chaos. You hold open-air grammar lessons beneath moonlight. You teach semicolon usage to a badger who insists on dramatic pauses. A pelican composes a limerick that accidentally summons a minor weather system. The animals, you notice, aren't just learning language. They're teaching each other. Cleon becomes the quiet mentor. He doesn't push, doesn't lecture, just listens, nudges, reminds them by his own stubborn gentleness that even the slowest among them has a story worth telling. One day, Sarpedon speaks again. Story is the shell, meaning is the creature inside. You gasp. Wait, is that a metaphor about you? He doesn't respond. Just slowly, ever so slowly, winks. You begin compiling everything into a massive scroll. Poems, essays, translations, strange hoofdoodles. It's messy, unpredictable, alive. You call it the Cleonic Codex. Historians still argue whether such a codex ever physically existed or was merely passed down in oral tradition by especially persuasive donkeys. Regardless, word spreads. The oracle herself quotes it during a prophecy. A mortal king requests a copy, and one curious teenager on a lonely island finds inspiration to teach her cat the Phoenician alphabet. You lie back one evening beneath the olive trees, exhausted and scribbling final notes. Cleon walks over, drops a half-eaten scroll in your lap. It reads, R-E-D. Your eyes sting. He wrote read or read. Doesn't matter. He chose a word. You reach over, pull him close, and whisper, "You brilliant beast." He brays softly and settles in. The moon climbs higher. The words swirl around you, and you know this isn't just a chapter anymore. It's a movement. Sleep, at this point, has become more of a suggestion than a necessity. Your dreams are crowded with donkey riddles, frogs conjugating verbs, and one particularly persistent owl demanding a thesis defense on metaphor density in moss. You wake to the sound of a parade forming, unofficial, but still very much blocking the main temple entrance. Apparently, word of the Cleonic Codex has hit the street, and every creature within a 50-mile radius wants to get hoofprints on the sequel, which doesn't exist. Yet. Still, you can't help but smile as you step into the courtyard and find a raccoon holding a tiny scroll and a quill, interviewing a peacock about the transformative power of vowels. Cleon is standing on a low wall, wearing a sash that reads, Head Librarian. You did not make this. He almost certainly stole it from the nearby village's maypole celebration, but the gravitas with which he wears it? Unquestionable. There's a moment when you catch your reflection in the temple's bronze water basin, eyes sunken from long nights, scroll ink on your cheek, tunic rumpled. You look like a teacher, the kind who's forgotten their own schedule but remembers the name of every goat in their poetry class. Athena's owl lands on your shoulder. It looks at you sideways, head tilted as if to say, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" You shrug. Absolutely not. But then you step into your impromptu classroom. Today's subject, storytelling structure. You chalk out 3 arcs on the stone. Rise, fall, rise again. Cleon draws a 4th, a spiral. You pause. That's good, really good. The spiral shape, a callback to your own speech at the summit, catches on. Soon, every student, human or otherwise, begins mapping their own tales in circular form. Turns out narratives are less about beginnings and ends, and more about orbits. Repetition, lessons revisited in new light. That evening, a tortoise and a hare submit a co-authored fable about time management. It ends with them opening a bookstore. It's meta, and surprisingly moving. One of your students, a young girl from the nearby village, asks if Cleon can visit her school and give a reading. You don't have the heart to say no, especially when Cleon starts braying in excited syllables that almost sound like, "I'm booked till Tuesday." So you go. The village teacher is skeptical at first. "He's a donkey." You nod. True, but also, he's a writer. Cleon stands at the front of the classroom, scroll unrolled. The kids lean forward. He begins tapping his hoof, punctuating syllables like poetry drums. You translate as he goes. It's not polished, it's not perfect, but it is magnetic. By the end, the class is chanting the final line. Every voice matters, even mine. They give him a standing ovation and a wreath of parsley, which he eats. You make your way back to the temple with a quiet sense of awe. Historians still argue whether the phenomenon of cross-species literacy was truly widespread or simply romanticized through selective storytelling. Some say it was a passing fad, others call it divine intervention. A few fringe theorists believe the whole thing was orchestrated by Kronos as an elaborate prank to distract mortals from impending doom. You're not interested in theories. You're interested in tomorrow's syllabus. You find an old scroll from your early days at the temple. It's a checklist titled, "How to Prove You're Worthy." The boxes are laughably outdated. Memorize 500 hymns. Recite all the names of Zeus's children backwards. Don't die during trials of ascension. You scribble out a new version. Love something improbable. Teach someone unexpected. Laugh when it fails. Try again anyway. There's a knock at your chamber door. It's a young centaur, nervous and awkward, holding a scroll covered in hoofprints. I want to read," they stammer. "But it's hard. My brain goes too fast. The words fall behind." You kneel down. Then we slow the words down until they catch you. They smile tearfully. You gesture them in. Cleon appears from behind a curtain, already dragging a cushion into place. And just like that, the next student begins. Later that week, you receive a scroll sealed with Athena's sigil. Inside, just a single line. You've outgrown the temple. You blink. It's not criticism, it's recognition. You read on. It's time to found your own school. Wherever creatures ask questions, let there be a teacher. Wherever learning seems absurd, let absurdity lead. Attached is a map. At the center, a plot of land near the river, overgrown but brimming with wild flowers and nightingales. You and Cleon visit it at dawn. You stand in the dew-soaked grass, imagining open pavilions, rolling scroll shelves, amphitheaters where words hang in the air like fruit ripe for the picking. Cleon sniffs the air, snorts, approves. You begin building. Not just structures, but culture. A place where syllables can be sung, scrawled, or stomped into dust and still matter. Where every student, regardless of species, arrives not with proof of worth, but simply with curiosity. A student carves a wooden sign for the gate, the spiral school, where no end is the end. It creaks when the wind brushes it. The sound is soft, like a whispered sentence waiting for punctuation. You go inside. Classes are about to begin. And so is everything else. You're not entirely sure when the spiral school stopped being just a school and started becoming something bigger. One morning, it's a few eager students reading under fig trees. The next, it's an open festival with wandering poets, skeptical magistrates, enchanted frogs in monocles, and one very enthusiastic badger selling souvenir scroll cases. You build slowly. No marble colonnades or gilded statues, just smooth stones for seats, olive wood desks, and canopies of linen that flutter like quiet applause every time the breeze visits. You paint the walls with fragments from the Cleonic Codex, lines like, "Letters are just footprints for thoughts," and "Mistakes are just stories warming up." The motto spreads. Downriver, a fisherman teaches his parrot to recite Pindar. In the hills, a shepherd claims his sheep respond better to Homer than to whistling. You get a letter from Delphi. The oracle requests a syllabus. Cleon becomes a living mascot. But not just in name, he teaches, or at least facilitates. His classroom style is very tactile. He stomps once for agreement, twice for confusion, and 3 times if he wants a snack. It's surprisingly effective. You catch him one day walking a squirrel through the basics of prepositions. He's patient, gestures with his nose. When the squirrel gets it right, he just stands there quietly, ears twitching. The squirrel hugs him. You pretend not to cry. Then there's the traveling troupe of philosophers who arrive to challenge the validity of animal cognition. They come armed with scrolls, metrics, and smirks. You invite them to observe one of Cleon's logic classes. He opens with this: "If I do not speak, does it mean I cannot think?" They laugh, until he uses a stick to draw a syllogism in the dirt, so airtight it silences the entire pavilion. By the end, the philosophers are scribbling frantically. One asks for tutoring, another tries to enroll their dog. Historians still argue whether Cleon ever understood formal logic or merely mirrored your gestures. But there's something in his eyes, measured, almost wry, that suggests more than mimicry. Some scholars now call it the Cleonic pause, that moment of thoughtful silence before action. It becomes a trademark across the Spiral School network. Yes, network. Because soon, Spiral Schools begin popping up elsewhere. You start getting messages tied to doves, tucked in fish gills, carved into bark. We've begun teaching foxes in the Alps. Our parrot wrote a play. Is it plagiarism if the goat steals his own haiku? Your scribes can't keep up, so you train more. And suddenly you're managing not just lessons, but infrastructure, curricula that adapt to species, debates over multi-hoof quill designs, and endless correspondence about the relative philosophical depth of a raccoon's memoir. One night you walk out to the fields, hoping for quiet. You find Cleon under the stars, lying beside Sarpedon the turtle. Neither speaks. You join them. Above, constellations shift, the sky's own kind of alphabet. Sarpedon finally murmurs, "Even the stars spell stories." Cleon snorts, which may mean obviously, or "Did you bring snacks?" You smile. But then, of course, comes the tremor. Not metaphorical, actual physical shaking of the ground. Mount Etna rumbles. The air smells sharp, electric. You receive warnings from oracles, cryptic portents, even a flaming peacock that crash lands with a note. Change comes. Protect the codex. You gather your staff. It's time for a contingency plan. You've always known ideas are fragile, especially revolutionary ones. The notion that minds not shaped like ours can still hold truth, that knowledge isn't exclusive, is threatening to the old guard. So you make copies, not just physical ones. You encode the codex into wind songs, into vine patterns, into rhythms that birds mimic and dolphins echo. The story of Cleon, of you, of the spiral, woven into the fabric of language itself. If the scrolls burn, the song will remember. One curious tactic involves baking small portions of the codex into bread recipes. "Is this a mnemonic device or a delicious accident?" a goat asks. You grin. Why not both? The spiral school becomes not just a place, but a philosophy. A meme before memes were cool. You get a note from Athena. It says only, "You've done it." They'll remember. That night, you stand on the highest hill. A storm brews far off, but the stars are clear overhead. You lift your own scroll. Read aloud the very first line Cleon ever hoofed into the dirt. "I am not silent. I am learning." And then you hear it, carried on the wind from miles away. Other voices, repeating the line. Some faltering, some bold, but all clear. The spiral is echoing back. It has begun. The morning after the storm, the world feels different. Not ruined, just rearranged. The olive trees lean in new directions. The temple bells ring a half-tone lower. And your favorite bench is now a full 6 inches to the left. You could swear it winked. Cleon strolls through the damp courtyard like it's a catwalk. The sash is gone, replaced by a laurel crown some student must have woven from mint and lavender. He smells like ambition and salad. Today marks the festival of shared tongues. Yes, you made it up. But now it's on regional calendars, and the mayor of Delos declared it a civic holiday. Merchants give discounts to customers who speak in verse. Bakers hide riddles in their loaves. A spider performs a soliloquy on a fig leaf that garners a standing ovation, and also minor panic. Your school is packed. Not just creatures now, though there's a lemur from Libya who insists on holding Socratic salons in trees. But humans too. Young scholars, old skeptics, and those who never imagined they'd belong in a classroom. A beekeeper trades honey for a logic primer. A blacksmith begs for the grammar of thunder. You catch Cleon leading a chant. "First we crawl, then we bray, then we learn to read the day." You mouth the words with him. It's happening. Not just literacy, but shared culture. A messy, multilingual, interspecies explosion of weird, glorious meaning. And yet, a letter arrives that night. Royal seal. You don't open it right away. Instead, you sit under the moonlight and remember the first time Cleon spelled apple. Remember the sound of frogs trying to pronounce diphthongs. Remember that one donkey who tried to copyright the letter O. You finally break the wax. It's a summons. Athens, the Areopagus, a formal council of scholars, priests, and lawmakers. They want to evaluate the spiral school. Cue dramatic thunderclap. Unnecessary but atmospheric. Historians still argue whether this council was organized in earnest pursuit of academic integrity, or a thinly veiled attempt to bring the spiral under tighter control. Some say the Temple of Apollo was jealous. Others claim a prominent philosopher's cat had applied and been rejected. Regardless, you have to go. You prepare. Pack scrolls, translations, testimonies. You rehearse with Cleon, who insists on performing his own defense. His opening line, "If wisdom's a vineyard, I'm the donkey who planted it." You don't stop him. It's too good. The journey is long. Villagers along the road offer apples, poems, even advice. Speak slow. Breathe. And one elderly woman's cryptic, "Don't let them clip your quills." You arrive in Athens to find the council chamber packed. 10 stone seats in a semicircle, tall judges in taller hats, and an audience of nobles, academics, and a surprising number of barn owls. A herald booms. We call forth the founders of the Spiral School. You and Cleon step forward. He's wearing a toga. It is deeply unflattering, but somehow dignified. You begin your defense. You talk about the power of symbol, of shared understanding between wildly different beings, of how language isn't about perfection but connection. You quote Hesiod, then a student's poem about the alphabet tasting like honey. Cleon demonstrates phonetic progression. He even spells his own name backward, Nolk, which sounds like a very sleepy festival. There are murmurs, a few smirks. Then the final question comes. A judge leans forward. Can a donkey truly understand what he reads? The room stills. Cleon steps forward, stares the judge down, and with infinite care writes a single line. Can you truly understand what you say? There is silence. Then a bark of laughter from the back. Then applause, and a faint whimper from the philosopher whose cat was rejected. The judges request time to deliberate. You and Cleon wait in the stoa, sharing olives and exhaustion. Finally, the decision is announced. By decree of the Areopagus, the Spiral School is recognized as a legitimate academic institution. Its methods, while non-traditional, are declared philosophically provocative and pedagogically sound. You are stunned. Cleon eats the official decree. You let him. Word spreads before you even leave the city. By the time you return, there's a new gate at the spiral's entrance. Students have carved it overnight. The lintel bears one sentence: every mind that reaches, teaches. You cry. Cleon brays. A choir of frogs sings the preamble to the codex in three-part harmony. And the stars that night seem to shimmer in Morse code. By now, the Spiral School pulses like a living thing, breathing in new voices, exhaling old doubts. You don't even teach most days. You guide, you produced. Sometimes you just sit in the amphitheater while a goose delivers a lecture on irony. It's pretty good. Cleon's fame has grown beyond anything you imagined. There's a statue now, sort of. A student constructed it out of driftwood, beeswax, and optimism. It wobbles when the wind hits it just right, as if it's preparing to break into interpretive dance. You approve. Every new student is greeted with a right. Cleon bumps his forehead gently against theirs. It's equal parts tradition, calibration, and plausible accident. No one complains. They feel inducted. Somewhere in this surge of joy and wonder, you get older. Your joints creak. Your naps lengthen. Your writing gets slower, more elegant. You wake one day to find that someone's started referring to you as the founder. Another calls you the quiet flame. A third just says, "Hey, you." You like that one. And now, on this quiet evening, you sit alone beneath the same fig tree where Cleon once mistook a syllable for a snack. It's blooming again, always blooming somehow. You look out at what you built, no, what grew. That's the real truth. You didn't mold this school, you planted a seed. The rest happened because creatures wanted it to. A feathered shadow flickers past. Athena's owl lands nearby, solemn as always. You stayed, you whisper. It blinks. You watched. It blinks again. Then it tilts its head in a very Cleon-like way and flutters off into the dusk. You lean back. Here's what they won't tell you in history scrolls. A skunk taught metrical rhythm. A mole learned to read Braille by starlight. A beetle wrote an epic that still makes philosophers weep, though no one's entirely sure if it was satire. Historians still argue whether this school was divine chance or social upheaval wrapped in cute packaging. A few even suggest it was all a metaphor. But the students, the ones who came and stayed and learned and returned to teach, they don't argue, they remember. Your final class is quiet. No fanfare. Just Cleon, 3 curious hedgehogs, and a heron named Persephone who's terrified of vowels. You teach them how to fail, not how to avoid it, but how to live with it, to learn from it, to let it soften them without dissolving them. You finish with this. The spiral isn't a path, it's a pattern. It shows up wherever someone chooses to understand instead of dismiss. They sit with that. Cleon nuzzles your elbow, then bumps a hedgehog, gently. You walk back to your room slowly. The lamp by your bed flickers with wind light. A student left a basket, figs, wild honey, and a tiny scroll that says, "Thanks for seeing what others didn't." You laugh softly, then you lie down. You don't sleep right away. First, you listen. To hooves on gravel, to quiet chants, to soft laughter in 6 languages, to an alphabet expanding just 1 letter at a time. And then, finally, you close your eyes, letting go not into silence, but into story. Wind down 300 words. And now, as your breath slows, so does the spiral. The courtyard quiets, the fig leaves stop rustling. Even Cleon, faithful, ridiculous, luminous Cleon, has settled beside your bed, his warm breath rising and falling in time with yours. The stars above no longer burn with intensity. They hum, a low, familiar whisper of light, the kind of light that doesn't demand attention, just wants to be noticed. Soft, slow, almost like a heartbeat. The scrolls are closed, the ink is dry. The last syllables of the day have been spoken, misspelled, and forgiven. And somewhere, a squirrel begins a bedtime story to her kits about a donkey who wrote a codex. One with no ending. Because endings are illusions, aren't they? The spiral keeps turning. Lessons come back around in different forms, echoing with new voices and old truths. You don't need to hold on. Just drift with it. Tonight, let your thoughts loosen like shoelaces. Let your questions curl up like cats. Let the world outside your blankets go quiet, gentle, and just a little bit strange. You're safe now. The school is still standing. The owl is still watching. The ink is still drying. And the story, it's still unfolding somewhere in the dark. Now sleep, dear listener. You've made it through the codex. And tomorrow the spiral begins again.